días. Hoy quiero darle la bienvenida a Claire Swift. Claire Swift es un personaje maravilloso que hoy tenemos el placer de tener con nosotros, acompañándonos. Claire es una diseñadora, pero su vida cambió en algún momento cuando alguien se acercó, un compañero de trabajo se acercó y le dijo: Claire, quiero hacer un trabajo con las mujeres de la cárcel. Y empezó en su mente a brincar el gusanito de la responsabilidad social. Hoy es la directora del Departamento de Responsabilidad Social del London College of Fashion en Londres. Y esto hace que tenga toda la sensibilidad y el conocimiento suficiente para acompañarnos hoy en esta charla que le hemos definido Comunicación para la Conciencia. Bienvenida, Claire, es un placer tenerte con nosotros.
Lovely, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be asked to present here today. It's an honor. Some of the other questions that have been posed to me for my presentation have been around how the fashion industry responds to many of the issues faced by the industry and society today. And within my presentation, within my role at London College of Fashion, these are some of the things that we attempt to answer. Next.
Claire, disculpa, ¿es posible que puedas encender tu cámara, por favor?
Yeah. Done. Shall I continue?
Yes.
Okay, so next. So first, a little bit about me. I was looking through some old photographs recently, and I noticed two very distinctive things about myself and my childhood. One was that I was always dressed in bright dresses, bright coloured socks and brogue shoes. And that I got from my mum. She was very interested in clothes and still is. And I think that's where my interest in fashion began. And the other is that we were always in nature. And that is from my dad. He used to have us in nature, come rain, wind, shine, snow. We would always be in nature. And those two things have sort of been part of myself and my development in my life. Next. Can we do the next slide? So fast forward, and this is me at Fashion College. I grew up with a really keen interest in fashion. I followed every single trend: glam rock, disco, punk, the Blitz Kids, Buffalo Girls, and many more. And I am really thankful that we didn't have iPhones in those days to record some of the very strange outfits that I used to wear. And by the way, you can see that I'm still into spots and polka dots, and that's still something I'm very keen on today. Can we have the next slide, please? So some of my most memorable fashion experiences came through the time that I was working in the industry in the 80s and 90s, and that was when my career was really just beginning. And I was really lucky to work with some of the most incredible designers in those times. And Body Map was one of them, and they exploded onto the European fashion scene. And in America, they were very well known in the mid-80s. And they created a real stir because they were unconventional, they were creative rebels, and they chose to do things their way. And they challenged the fashion norms and the way fashion was. So They had very little budget. They couldn't afford models or photographers. And then the models that came onto the catwalks at those times were mums, friends, kids, pets, dancers, and everyone was all shapes and sizes. And it was a show, and all of their shows celebrated diversity, they were inclusive, and in their own way, they were sort of challenging what fashion should be. Really, some of the early photographers, Mario Testino was one of their friends. He used to photograph and do all their shoots. He went on to become a famous photographer in his own right. But what was interesting is that they were challenging and disrupting the systems even then. Next slide, please. So another British designer, Catherine Hamnett, again, one of the 80s designers and one of the foremost designers of protest. There's a very famous photograph of her inside Downing Street, and she was shaking the Prime Minister's hand, and she was wearing a t-shirt saying 58% don't want Pershing. And she wore it, she changed in the toilets once she got into the building, and she made sure that all the photographers and the newspapers saw her wearing this shirt, and it was all over the newspapers the next day. And her protest was about the US nuclear warheads being installed in the UK. And she has continued to use her work and her voice to protest about some of the issues she sees in the world today. And she challenges and has been challenging processes and sustainability within fashion ever since the 80s, and continues to do so along with many other designers. Next, please. So we know that today, one of the major considerations, and what everyone is really, really concerned about, is climate change. It's at the forefront of our society, as well as COVID and other issues, but it pretty much dominates the global news everywhere. Next. We know that the fashion industry has a voice, and they have a voice to speak about what matters, about climate emergency, social injustice, gender inequality, and it is about the collective voice. But fashion has a responsibility to respond to some of the issues that the industry has actually implemented themselves. Next. So when I joined London College of Fashion and I moved from the industry into teaching, it gave me the opportunity to really open a discussion about what we can learn from fashion and what fashion can learn from us. Next. We know fashion touches our lives every day. It crosses boundaries, and it's everywhere within society. So of course it makes it the perfect tool to be able to create a voice and a platform around change. Next. So, as Danny mentioned, this was my very first experience. We worked on a project with women in prison. I took my students into the prison, and we collaborated and co-produced a project with the women, and we provided and facilitated a platform for the women to tell their story through the creative process. They embroidered their thoughts onto a jacket that was upcycled using upcycled materials and trims and other fabrics. And this gave our students and the staff that we took in there, and including myself, an insight into what fashion could really do. It was transformative, and that memory stayed with me, and it sort of has started, or at that time it started, my will to try to work within this space. Next. So we started to research and understand what it meant to be a woman in prison, an overlooked group, a very small overlooked group, who suffered a range of different issues, not only once they were in prison, but actually before and after prison. And we decided at that time that we ought to develop something, some long-term project that could, A, magnify the struggles that the women faced, give those women a voice, and try to sort of enable some kind of change. Next. There's been several reports around women in prison, but one of the most significant was written by Baroness Corsten, who looked at the three very different issues: domestic issue, which is where many women may have experienced violence, personal, mental health or substance abuse, and socio-economic. Again, many women may even just be in prison because they've stolen or they've shoplifted to feed their children. So that poverty and unemployment is a contributory factor, but all of these contribute towards why some of these women are in prison. And her recommendations in this report was to develop a holistic approach to addressing some of the issues that women faced within prison. Next. So we started to think about how we could really provide that opportunity. Where were women's voices being heard? How could they explore themselves in a safe space and their skills? What could we do to sort of really explore different kinds of practices? And obviously the obvious practices for us were around fashion making and exploring innovative skills and craft skills, and sort of ensuring that the women could sort of develop or even learn new skills within this. Next. But the very first thing we did was we approached the women themselves. We asked them what they felt they wanted to do. What was it that we could do to help them to facilitate a project that was meaningful and had some kind of meaning, not only to them, but to their families and to their support system. So they came up with the idea of a fashion magazine. There was no fashion magazines within the prison. They had very little access to anything that was outside, but they wanted to own this magazine for themselves. So we called it The Beauties Inside. That came from them. We collaborated with the women. We brought fashion photographers from the courses and fashion journalists, and we facilitated a space for each issue over the next 4 years for the women to decide what the articles were they were going to write about, what was important for them, what they wanted to have other people notice. So within the magazine, both the women and the students found their voice, and they wrote for the next 4 years about what was important to them. Next. So these are some of the things that the women said. They said that it doesn't feel like they have anything to look forward to, they don't feel relevant, and they feel very invisible. And so we found that encouraging them to write about some of the things that they felt really started to build on their self-esteem. It started to build on their self-confidence and actually started to think about where this could take them. Next. The students themselves said this experience was life-changing, and I would say the staff also said that. Next. Many of the students that have been involved in the projects through social responsibility have gone on to continue to do this type of work, either in their final major projects and beyond the university. They've said that it's something that really sort of touched and resonated with them, so much so that they wanted to really understand how they could continue to develop their skills and knowledge that could make a difference. And for us, it is about changing. If we can change at the education level, when our students go out into the industry, they are the ones that will challenge the industry. Next. So this is what we're saying: education should encourage change and create a fairer society and a better world. And actually, our participants and students and the partners that we work with, they are the ones that are there to help change us with it. Next. Some of the things that we ask our students, or we sort of train our students with when we take them into the prison, next slide please, is that we ask them to practice their skills of empathy, to really understand perhaps how the women might feel, to see their world and to appreciate. So again, in terms of breaking down barriers and understanding how they can continue to work in this way, for us, it's about training with these skills of empathy so they can understand. And one of the things that many of our students and staff say when we work on these projects is, actually, this could be any one of us. And again, it's being able to understand and build further from that. Next. So one of the biggest projects that we've created, it was in collaboration with the prison service, and it started in 2014, and it's called Making for Change. And it's a training and manufacture space inside a women's prison. Next. So this photograph is the unit inside the prison. It's set up as a production unit would be, but obviously I've been into some production units in London, and they are absolutely nowhere near as nice as this. It's a light, airy space with plenty of facilities and we have really great resources, machinery, equipment. The women get to learn on production. So we work with designers, and the women are learning their skills in collaboration with some of those designers. Next. So this is the model we have. We built Making for Change Downview in 2014, and this year in 2020 we have a sister program in Poplar Works, which is another Making for Change training and production unit in the community in the east of London. So this is the model of our training. So they train alongside working on the production, and then the opportunity to have employment upon release for the women, or the women in the community for the work experience in the production program that is in the community. Next. These are some of the industry partners. These are some of the industry partners and some of our alumni. Next. This is the space in the community in Poplar Works, and it's based on the same model that we have within the prison. And it's a partnership with a local authority and also a company called the Trampery, and they work with small businesses. And this space here was 100 disused garages that have been transformed into a fashion hub. So surrounding the Making for Change space are other designers and small studios. So there's training, there's enterprise programs, and there's low-cost studios for fashion businesses. And it's set in the heart of the community. Next. This just talks about really some of the skills and what skills do in terms of learning new skills, developing communication and social skills. We found that some of the women that we work with in the community, they are faced by similar issues to the women in prison. So those projects, they work together. The women come from the prison, they have the soft landing and are able to work within the community. Some of the women in the community have never had a job, they've never learned a skill. So this space is this, as it says here, a surrogate family that unites everyone together and brings everyone together in a safe working space. Next. And these are some of the skills. This is what some of the women talk about, the skills. Next. Activism is another theme that we explore. Next. And a project that we worked on in 2018, and it was to celebrate the centenary of granting the first women the right to vote. And so some of the suffragettes were in prison and they were treated very badly, but they sort of fought to have the women's vote. So this project was really marking that time and 100 years ago. Next. So our women in the prison and our students and tutors all worked together to create banners that really sort of spoke around their thoughts and their feelings, and they protested. Next. This was a national art project, and it was run live across 5 different cities across the UK. And these banners were paraded around the streets, and the women were able to see them on their televisions in the prison, and they saw the banners that they made. That was really significant for us. But also this was televised on a 3-hour programme across the whole of the UK. Again, a significant. Next. The other thing that we explore is well-being. And for us, next slide, please. What we understand is that the importance of community and the importance of community-based work and our connection to community really helps our participants to sort of really feel a sense of well-being, and we open up different opportunities for them to engage and work together and then eventually create more stable lives. Next. We did an evaluation and a report with some of the women in the prison, and our researcher understood that the project Making for Change to help the women to develop new skills and capabilities. We saw improved mental health, and we also saw hope and aspiration, and it changed their outlook. They actually started to think that they had the skills and the confidence to do something once they left prison. Next. This is a project made by our women, which was another collaborative project with another university, and these are dementia blankets. So they are they're fidget blankets. They have sensory stimulation for dementia patients, and this was on an exhibition, but they were done in collaboration with the Dementia Society. So it's really about thinking. So our women from the prison created the blankets for another community, and this was the exhibition of that project. Next. Next. All of our work is around collaboration, and some of the partners that we work with, they share our vision, they share our philosophies. And one of these projects, again, it's about highlighting an issue that we see within society, and particularly in London, knife crime and young people being out of work, being jobless, homeless. That kind of brings all sorts of other issues into play. So we worked with Art Against Knives. They're a charity that work with these young people, and these young people who've been affected by knife crime. And the project was called Design and Make. And these students, you can see on the screen here some of the work that they created. What we did was we gave these young people hand knives, and we asked them to create, or they wanted to create, their own bags. So we gave them hand knives, hand tools, leather, and all of the workshops, facilitation through the technicians. Everyone came together to help these young people create their own pieces and their own work. A couple of them have gone on to come into study at London College of Fashion, and one of them has gone on to an apprenticeship with a leather workshop. Next. And another collaborative project. Again, for us, it's about the collective voice and bringing several communities together. Here, this was a community in San Padriano. It's a rehabilitation community where young people have suffered with drug and alcohol abuse, and they enter the community and they learn a craft skill. And then again, with the women in Making for Change in Downview, they came together. There was a gift exchange, and our students were part of this collaboration, and a young designer called Bethany Williams. And this whole project was about giving voice to the maker and exploring the fellowship of craft. Next. Here we have Bethany Williams, the designer, who was working with the design lab in San Padriano, and the weaving of the fabrics used old materials and found materials and disused and waste, and created new materials from these items. And the students designed garments with these old materials that had been created, new materials that had been created by the lab. And the women in prison made them. Next. This was a platform for the project to be delivered. It was a platform exploring and asking questions about fashion and sustainability. It was in Arnhem in the Netherlands. Next. This is the exhibition space with the garments made by the women and the students, and the designs that were facilitated by the designer Bethany Williams. Next. And this is the story that we told in the exhibition. in that circularity where everyone comes together. Next. And this is the weave of the 150 people that were part of this project, and we created our own weave for it. Next. And again, another of our projects, which is about Mending for Good, where we train women with embroidery skills, and these women work on old knitwear, and they mend the old knitwear to create new, vibrant, amazing pieces of clothing. Next. So here I've just sort of put some of our partnerships, some of the work that we do, collaborating and working with our partners is really, really important for us. As I said, it helps us to get that work out there and to provide a voice for our participants. We're looking into the circular economy, we're looking into the overuse of overproduction, what we should do with the waste and the fabric waste. So a lot of the work we do within the production areas is around upcycling. So we work with designers who design and create upcycled garments. And we understand that the craft and the well-being and the skills contribute towards the well-being of the participants. You can see some of the big projects that we've done. And actually also further over on the right, it's really about what our place is within society and how we can be part of the community, and that the community can engage with us as a university, and that as an inclusive institution, that's really key and very important for us. And then on the other hand is our students going out into the industry. And part of this was next, please. So we see change. We do see that some designers and retailers are responding to the issues in society. Selfridges have launched a huge thing. Let's change the way we shop. They have a mending space within their shop. They're supporting many designers, Bethany Williams being one of them, who really talks and works with community. And they're sort of providing a platform and a space for designers to showcase their work, to also talk about what they do within the community, and to think differently about how their retail environment looks. Next. These are American designers, but again, just as an example of the way in which I talked about sort of authenticity. So designers now, both small and large, I think, are responding to the world and the demands within the world and the issues. And here's an example of someone who is providing, it's working on the TOMS model. So for every pair of socks they sell, they provide clothing for within homeless shelters. So again, an authentic brand, sort of, I think not doing good, but actually rising to the challenge and making and authentically wanting to make change. Next. Something that we've been doing during the last few months in both Making for Change in the prison and also in the community is we have been making absolutely tons and tons and tons of PPE garments. And we've made connections with hospital trusts, community centres, and we've been providing gowns, we've been providing PPE, scrubs, and we've been providing masks. And we've been working with designers who've been donating fabric, and we've been collaborating. And again, this is another American designer, but they have actually transformed their whole business to really focus on PPE garments, and also sort of really, they provide free support for some teams, and then their business model is based on some of the work that they sell enables them to provide free PPE to the communities in need. Next. And actually, I guess it's something that we have to have many champions, we have to have people who talk about it, we have to have people who write about it in the newspapers, who protest about it, and designers who give examples of how we can have new businesses that address these issues. So some of these are some of our fashion champions. And I had a very interesting conversation with a journalist yesterday who was talking to me, and she said, oh, we were kind of doing a lot of good at London College of Fashion, but actually I believe we're sort of a little bit behind some of the amazing projects that the rest of the world are doing, and social enterprise and working with community in Latin America has been going on for years and years and years, and within education. So I would say that we're slightly behind, but we're actually moving towards making a difference in Europe and the UK. Next. So my conclusion is that I believe that fashion is very well placed to respond to some of the issues. After all, the fashion industry has created some of these issues, so therefore we have to take responsibility for that change within society, for recognising the invisible makers, for recognising the huge, huge and vast quantities of clothing that go to landfill, and for educating not only our consumers, our students, and everyone who actually looks to fashion and views fashion as something to adhere to. Actually, it's about fashion using the knowledge to create change. Next slide. Thank you.
Claire, muchísimas gracias. Vamos a iniciar entonces con las rondas de preguntas que las personas nos han escrito por el chat. Entonces, vamos a iniciar con esta primera. ¿De qué manera la comunicación es clave para estos procesos de reconstrucción del tejido social?
I think communication is key, particularly in sort of the bigger industry. Places like Caring, who are sort of giants of the industry, LVMH, they are the influencers. And without those influencers, not only are they influencing, and everything usually comes from the top down, and really it's about those influencers. They have the resources to do the research, they have the resources to be able to implement change within the industry and the systems and the machinery and everything that they use. But then the smaller designers are usually the ones that are more political, have a louder voice, and they demand change and they sort of agitate. Whereas the bigger designers are the ones that really should be implementing it from the very top of the industry.
Muy bien, vamos a continuar entonces con este espacio de preguntas y nos dicen lo siguiente desde el chat. Me inspiras mucho todo lo que haces. Algún día me gustaría dedicarme a algo parecido. Y la pregunta que hace es, ¿crees que en el futuro no muy lejano la moda tome más importancia en los estudios sociales y deje verse simplemente como una disciplina superficial?
I really, really, really hope so. I believe that, I mean, when I understand when I work with the women in the prison or the women in the community or any of the makers that I have been very privileged to work with in my life, I sort of understand that we've got a very, very invisible community, and a lot of the protests, fashion revolution, etc., they are the ones that are bringing all of these voices to the fore. And I do believe, yes, social sciences are becoming more interested in actually the world of fashion. We have to be very, very much more inclusive. We have to change the systems. It's a systemic change that has to happen. So I very much hope so that this will happen through the work that we're doing and others in the industry.
Bien, Claire, vamos con esta última pregunta que nos hacen desde el chat. Y más que una pregunta, es una solicitud. ¿Nos puedes compartir alguna página, una página web para ver los proyectos que presentaste, perdón, y generar un poco más de interacción desde las redes sociales?
Yes, I can share. There's lots of different things that I can share with you. One of my, this is my argument with my university at the moment. University of the Arts is such a huge university, and I am one college, and my project is one area with one college. And I am trying very hard to get our own website for Making for Change. We do not yet, but it will be coming. But I can share on different platforms many of the other projects that we've done.
Perfecto. Claire Swift, desde London College of Fashion, desde el Reino Unido, en esta conferencia magistral, Comunicación para la Conciencia. Gracias, Claire. Y antes de finalizar, quiero invitar a todos los asistentes a visitar las exhibiciones virtuales en 3D de indumentaria, diseño de espacios, artesanías, artes plásticas, fotografía y disfrutar de las distintas experiencias programadas como los Fashion Field, conciertos de música, espectáculos de danza y cooking shows. Además, podremos conocer los proyectos de emprendimiento de la Gobernación de Nariño, la Alcaldía de Barranquilla, SENA, Bancoldex, Cámara de Comercio de Cartagena, Confenalco Bolívar y Supergiros. Y podrán visitar nuestra muestra comercial y zona naranja, en la que encontrarán proyectos de emprendimiento de economía naranja, llenos de creatividad e innovación, y usar el carrito de compras para adquirir los productos favoritos a precios especiales solo en Ixel. Y antes de finalizar, los quiero invitar a las 2:30 de la tarde, hora Colombia, a un exquisito postre cultural donde hablaremos de la cultura del registro. Allí tendremos al comunicador Daniel Grajales, director y fundador de la revista Papel de Colombia, y a Camo Delgado, fotógrafo y cineasta, creador digital también desde Colombia. Claire, muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos en esta versión especial de Ixel Online 2020. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.